Good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning. Seeing you from a different perspective today. Feeling extremely well supported by my choir. I mean, not just the opening, which was lovely, but Dana and the reading and the special music. And thank you for that special music. It's so appropriate for today's message. So I had asked them specifically to sing it because I had heard the words. Gary had an experience with this song when he goes into work in the morning. The first 5 minutes he takes for meditation. And I don't know whether he normally types or not, but this he does. He's in there where he can type. He was in meditation, and this entire song downloaded. Just, wow. And he came home and said, Martha. So then they had to do the music and the chords and figure all the rest of the stuff out. It was absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much. And you will recognize, I think you'll go back to the song by way of some of the things that we say in the message today. So, the beginning of the month, when Cindy introduced this month of behavior, which is really what it's all about, our ways of behavior, she was talking about the faith of a flower. How a flower just knows, has faith that it's going to bloom. You put a seed in the ground, it knows it's going to be nurtured, it knows everything's going to go on. Whether it's one flower on a stem or whether it's a bush with 1,000 flowers. They know, they have faith, they trust, and they bloom. And Patrick last week talked about non-resistance and reminded us that when we resist, it persists. No, what is that? When we resist it, that's right, it persists, the resistance persists. So clearing away the resistance is very, very important to being able to move forward in life. And so those are the two messages up today. And today, we're up to the art of support. Support is a word that's familiar to all of us. But I looked it up in the online dictionary anyway, and I had to laugh because it spewed out 10 pages of information. So, in summary, folks, there are all kinds of support in all areas of life. But for today, let's use the following definitions. Support is help, assistance, encouragement, friendship, loyalty, blessings, and more. You may have little words that are creeping into your brain of what support means to you. Keep them because they're for you. It could come as a listening ear. It could come as an answer to prayer, a safe place to be, a needed ride, an unexpected cash flow, a gift of love, or simply someone to hold a ladder for you. Take a moment to look about you. You are being supported right now by the chair holding you up, by the persons of like mind surrounding you and sharing their hearts. You're in your physical space of inner quest, where love abounds all over the property and within our buildings. And you are sitting in this beautiful spiritual home where you are supported through the teachings, the healing opportunities, and the services themselves with the sharing of music, laughter, words, and meditations. Here you are, giving and receiving support with one another as you share together. Giving and receiving, and giving and receiving. There's a metaphysical law that's called giving and receiving. As you shall give, so shall you receive. That is what is in play here. Both the giving and the receiving need to occur in order to keep the flow ongoing. And this giving and this receiving is the natural way for us to live in harmony with one another and, in fact, with all of life. Let's take a look at the life of Jesus, where he certainly had all kinds of support throughout his life. First and foremost, he knew God intimately as his true source. He knew God would always supply what he needed. He stayed connected to God all the time, seeking the silence and spiritual refreshment often. And Jesus always followed God's guidance. How about that? Secondly, he kept himself open to support coming to him from others. He allowed the flow of support to come in. And that support came in all four areas. Physically, he was supported by the women who fed him and his disciples, and through the gifts of money. Emotionally, by his mother, Lazarus, Mary, Martha, his disciples, and others. Mentally, by the multitudes who came to listen, learn, and grow. And spiritually, he was supported by his great teachers and the sages. Jesus never lacked for anything because he was willing to accept the help and support of those around him. I love that throughout his ministry, he would take people to his mother's home, and she would feed them. Jesus taught about brotherhood, kindness, and God's love. And he lived what he taught. In the Aquarian Gospel, chapter 74, verses 16 through 22, my helper. I don't have a Patrick, but I have a J. Verses 16 through 22. In this chapter, these three situations are not when he was teaching, and they're obviously not all at the same time. They just appear in the same chapter. But these are three wonderful examples of Jesus giving support where it was needed, where he found it, not necessarily where he was teaching, but as he came upon situations. Now in the evening, Jesus stood beside a pool. A playful child had fallen in, and it was drowned, and friends were bearing it away. But Jesus called the carriers to stop, and then he stretched himself upon the lifeless form, and breathed into its mouth the breath of life. And then he called aloud unto the soul that had gone out, and it returned. And the child revived and lived. That's example one. And Jesus saw a wounded dog. It could not move. It lay beside the way and groaned with pain. He took it in his arms and bore it to the home where he abode. He poured the healing oil onto the wounds. He cared for it as though it were a child till it was strong and well. That's example two. And Jesus took a child, and Jesus saw a little boy who had no home, and he was hungry. When he called for bread, the people turned away. And Jesus took the child and gave him bread. He wrapped him in his own warm coat and found for him a home. To those who followed him, the Master said, if man would gain again his lost estate, he must respect the brotherhood of life. Whoever is not kind to every form of life, to man, to beast, to bird, and creeping thing, cannot expect the blessings of the Holy One, for as we give, so God will give to us. Here is our best example of a good giver and receiver, our dear elder brother Jesus. He was always open to support, had no trouble seeing it, and gratefully accepted it. The flow was constant in his life because the giving and the receiving were ongoing. So how are we at accepting support in our lives? Do we expect it? Do we look for it? Do we give support to others? We're grown-ups, adults. How much flow do we have in our lives? I can only speak for myself, and let me tell you, sometimes it's great, and other times it's pretty dry. Why is that? Let's go back and look at the journey of a child once it comes to planet Earth. In the beginning, our little ones listen to us, don't they? They receive food, love, caring, and the touch they need and desire from us as parents. At that point, the parents are the child's world. And as the child grows, it begins to notice there is a world of interest beyond the parents. The focus shifts. The child learns the word no and loves to use it. It will stand there when it's due and say, no, 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 no. It makes no sense to what you're saying to them, but they've learned that word. We taught it to them. Then by the time the child reaches school age, a sense of self is developing. And there are choices to make in this larger world. Look at those wide open eyes, taking in everything they can. At this point, we are still able to make suggestions, answer questions, and reason with them. But then going up the school years to preteen and beyond, they develop a greater sense of self-awareness. At this point, when they go in search of who they are, they typically close the door to our support. Who here has raised a teenager that has not experienced their own advice becoming unwelcome? Peers become counselor to peers. Uh-oh. For years, they just don't think we bossy, old, out-of-it adults know anything that is relevant to their own pre-adult minds and years. But take heart, by the time they reach their mid-20s, which is about the time their brains finish developing, suddenly that same person begins to realize that our knowledge is really pretty good. In fact, it might even be true. And it's then, really, and only then, that they can open their consciousness and take a new look at their lives for patterns, for blocks, for ways to create greater flow in their lives. This could be the story of many of us. We learn to be independent when we're young. Often we do that by closing door after door to recognizing and receiving support. The "I can do that myself," or pride, fear of change, self-consciousness, really can get hooked into us. Fear is really behind most of that. When you release your fears, you can live in love, and you will be amazed then at how openly you can look at things. You know, there's a pattern in race consciousness that tells us not to accept support. It believes that it must cost you, and cost you dearly, to give. And that you must be hurting before you can receive. And even in the healing practice around here, which is open all the time, how many times do you stop and think to schedule a healing session just to keep things going, keep things open in your lives? And then all of a sudden, you're really in pain, and it comes into your mind, oh, I need some help here. But you could have it much, much sooner than that. Actually, this pattern in race consciousness is not true. The reverse of that is true. For it costs us to withhold support, to not share when it's needed. For when we do that, we're telling the universe we're not giving. We're not giving at all. And each time we do this, it interrupts the flow going to spirit to say, hi. And when we cause hurt to ourselves, or rather we do cause hurt to ourselves when we refuse the gift or turn away the giver. When we do that, we're telling the universe we don't need any help. We can do it all ourselves, thank you very much. This interrupts the flow coming to us from spirit. So how much flow are we able to have in our lives if we live the race consciousness way? Can you feel the walls that we build when we withhold and when we turn someone away? This kind of living blocks flow in our lives, and done to the extreme, we would end up living in isolation. Not our purpose here on planet Earth. We humans are created to live in relationship to one another, enjoying one another, and sharing with all of life. Let me share with you a personal story, a recent one, in which I happen to have discovered that I have grown a little bit in this area of support. I've been circulating around town for years, and especially it's been bad the past 4 to 6 months, in my wonderful Toreador red Taurus wagon. 200,000 miles, over 200,000 miles. No heat, no air. Transmission, it's not done yet. Transmission has developed slowly, and the engine, which would purr every time I would turn it on, was secretly rusting from the inside out. And blah, 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 other minor things in it. So my mechanic finally said, this is it, I'm putting it on paper. When I went in for one of my little things with him, he wrote down, this car is a danger. I have told this woman it could, literally, it could blow up on her at any time. That is the only point at which I said, I think I better go get a new car. So I was looking for a reliable car, used, that had miles on it, but that I knew would still have several good years in it. And I promised my son when I started this I would keep him informed, one of my sons. Well, when I found a 2002 Camry with 117,000 miles on it that really looked good and I felt I could afford, I gave him a call. Thinking his response would be fine, go ahead, we'll keep in contact. Instead he said, that's a lot of miles, Mom, even though it's a Camry. Let me see what I can do from out here. And the next thing I knew, all 3 of my children had put their heads together and decided they wanted to help me out so I would get a car with low mileage. Now, I am an independent person. Any of you not aware of that? And the idea of having my children involved this way would have absolutely humiliated me a few years ago. And I would not have accepted it. Fortunately, I am not that person now. So long story short, thanks to their involvement, and now that they are, the creative expression of them now is my bankers, I now happily drive around in Spirit Wings, my adorable light blue 2007 Hyundai Accent. And I thank God and them daily. And I'm finding I love being more open and in the flow of God's love. I'm enjoying the giving and the receiving. And I'm working on being there much more often. Are you desiring to receive more support in your life? Be more in the flow? See with new vision, new eyes? Be fully open to those new possibilities? Are you?
Yeah.
All right. I would love to share with you 5 steps that I have found helpful to bring more support into my life.